So some of you have been asking for an Attack on Titan crossover. And yeah, you know what? Why not get into it? Attack on Titan is easily one of the most politically charged anime since One Piece, and it tackles the topics of man's hubris, disenfranchisement, genocide, and the justification of atrocities. But it starts like any other seinen anime, and is, indeed, in and of itself, a monomyth. Eren Yeager, Armin Arlert, and Mikasa Ackerman. To me, the parallel seems obvious. The three of them have been friends since childhood, and eventually grow up to inherit the will of their parents to fight for freedom and their privileged life in Alden. But much like with the walls in Attack on Titan, this is a false safety. We learn very early on that the destruction can come to the walls and through them just as easily as if there were no walls at all, and that is because the enemy is already inside them. And the same can be said for Alden, but what that means exactly, well, I'm not at liberty to say. The bond between Eren, Armin, and Mikasa closely resembles the friendship of Martin, Shane, and Madeline, respectively. And in that, there's a lot we can learn from AOT and how it relates to TOA. Attack on Titan, at its core, is a war story. It's a story about hubris and trauma, how power corrupts, and how absolutely no one in a war is the good guys. It was once said that war does not determine who is right, only who is left, and war never changes. But what does it all mean? Well, in Attack on Titan, extreme militarization is a survival mechanism. The entire society within the walls is constructed around fear of the Titans, creating a constant siege mentality. Siege mentality is a collective mindset where a group of people feels they are constantly under attack or oppressed by the outside world. This can lead to a feeling of isolation and a heightened sense of fear and an overtly defensive attitude, as seen in some political groups or societies with a history of persecution. It's often fueled by a belief that the rest of the world has negative intentions toward them. Children like Eren, Mikasa, and Armin are indoctrinated into a military-industrial complex that thrives on trauma, vengeance, and nationalism. Take Eren Yeager. Eren first witnesses the brutal death of his mother at the hands of a Titan. This catalyzes his transformation from a naive child into someone consumed by rage. He joins the Survey Corps, absorbing their values of sacrifice and retribution. Over time, he becomes desensitized to violence. Upon learning that he is a Titan shifter, only amplifies his internal fragmentation. He becomes the thing he hates most, and in doing so, the line between victim and monster begins to blur. Through the years of Titan battles and bloody conflict, Eren is re-traumatized again and again. In fact, the simple act of transforming and using his powers against other Titans reinforces the trauma. He begins to see how he can utilize his monstrous side. Despite his feelings of insecurity about it, and the misgivings of his own comrades in government, they begin to rely on him in order to be their ace and take back what has been taken from humanity. A sort of manifest destiny nationalist mindset. Eventually, he sees what this conflict is doing not only to himself, but to his friends and comrades. They get killed, maimed, mutilated before his eyes, and something in Eren snaps. He embraces his monstrosity completely and takes the war back to the side of the Titans in an apocalyptic event known as the Rumbling. Eren rationalizes genocide as the only way to protect his friends. He wipes out 80% of humanity, what would otherwise be classified by scientists and historians as an extinction-level event. Despite his disenfranchisement with Marley and Eldia's oppression, he embraces destruction as a means of peace, a textbook case of moral injury and militarized fatalism. Eren Yeager is the embodiment of Attack on Titan's failed political system. Raised to be a weapon, he ultimately becomes the very monster he feared. And Armin and Mikasa don't fare much better. Armin becomes the colossal Titan, a paradox, the most peace-seeking character wields the most destructive Titan. He internalizes utilitarian ethics and accepts that necessary evil is a part of peace. His speech at the end of the series reveals survivor's guilt and strategic manipulation rather than hope. Mikasa started life early with a similar trauma to Eren. Her family was murdered by slavers who hoped to sell her as a concubine or commodity due to her Asian heritage. This wound never fully heals, and it's what drives her loyalty to Eren through most of the series, leading to her own atrocities. She becomes a tool of the system, a living weapon raised by the military via Levi and the Scouts. Ultimately, it drives her to kill the one person she loves most, to stop even greater violence. In this regard, Eren feels he has no choice. But this is the rationalization, not the truth. He still chooses mass murder and justifies it with destiny. This duality shows the hubris of martyrdom. He sees himself as the necessary evil, a god among humans and titans via the founding titan. He manipulates history, memory, and even time itself. But when his rationale is challenged by Armin, he has nothing. His quote, "I don't know why I did it," indicates not only disassociation, but also a deeper nihilism, where the indifference to his actions codifies an internal lack of moral compass, and a feeling that nothing in the world actually matters anyway. His hubris in living color. The series itself doesn't endorse Eren's actions, but complicates the morality in a number of ways. Marley justifies oppressing Eldians because of their Titan past. This notion that those currently living are culpable for the actions of their ancestors has long been used as a reason to justify systemic oppression and racial violence as well. Because of this, we see both the oppressor and the oppressed dehumanize each other cyclically. But make no mistake, this isn't just a both sides are bad argument. It's a story about how might doesn't make right, and how systems of mass oppression ultimately create even more monsters. Attack on Titan is a critique of systems where fear leads to violence, and violence becomes justice. How does this relate to Tales of Atonement Monomyth? Monomyth is set in the 1300s in Scotland, during a time of tense political struggles, though, for the most part, Alden seems to be a section apart from it. Still, there are echoes. The Rose family being exiled from London due to witchcraft that Edna was accused of mirrors the sort of dehumanizing language that Marley uses for Eldians, but removing the mystical element of the story and striking the historical part of this historical fiction, it also mirrors the language of King Edward against the Scottish people as well. Much of the anti-Scottish literature of the Middle Ages drew heavily on the writings of Greek and Roman antiquity. Claudius Ptolemy, in the 2nd century, dominated concepts related to Scotland until the late Middle Ages and drew on stereotypes that painted Scots in a way that is startlingly close to how the Titans were depicted. There are stories of ancient Scots engaging in cannibalism, blood drinking. They were called violent and unruly troublemakers. Stereotypes that persisted especially of the Highlanders until the mid-18th century. Shakespeare's Macbeth was itself considered a pro-British, pro-Hanoverian, and anti-Jacobite play. The Highland Scots were depicted as British thugs, figures of ridicule and no match for the civilized Lowland Scots, supporters of the Protestant Hanoverians. They were feminized as a parody of the female disguise used by Prince Charlie during his escape, and as savage warriors that needed the guiding hand of the Lowland Scots Protestants to render them civilized. But conversely, for King Edward, he was known as the Hammer of Scots for his brutality and cruelty to the Scottish people. When William Wallace was captured in 1305 in Rob Royston near Glasgow, he was dragged naked behind a horse to the place where he would be executed while onlookers jeered and booed the whole way. He was hanged but released while he was still alive. Then he was emasculated, eviscerated, and his entrails were burned in front of him. He was then beheaded and cut into 4 parts. Wallace's head was displayed on a pike near London Bridge as a warning, and after a period of public display, it was discarded into the River Thames to decay alone and forgotten. His body was dismembered, with his limbs sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. This sort of dehumanization is the exact same for Marley and the Eldians, and how they make a spectacle of Eren for the Titan that he becomes. There's so much Honestly, so much real-world history that this series pulls from. Marley's internment zones mirror German fascist ghettos. Eldians wear armbands that are akin to the identification patches for Jewish and queer people during the Third Reich. The notion of inherited sin of the Eldians being punished for ancient crimes reflects anti-Semitic ideology. This is fascism and imperialism at its core. The Eldian Empire represents ancient hegemon, having a supreme leader, the founding Titan. Marley uses brainwashed soldiers to fight the Titans, something we can see here and now in conflicts I can't name on YouTube without getting demonetized or straight up taken down. In these sorts of conditions, children become involved in armed groups through both forced abduction and voluntary association, though the latter often stems directly from desperation. Many children of these types of regimes are abducted from their homes, schools, or refugee camps. Or, armed groups may set recruitment quotas or targets for certain communities and expect for families to provide a child. In conflict zones, poverty and the lack of opportunity are endemic. Children, especially orphans, or those separated from their families, may join groups to ensure survival through access to food, shelter, or medical care. For others, it's protection in a violent environment or a sense of identity and belonging that the group offers. Through the valorization of martyrdom, militaristic propaganda may slide by unnoticed and be so subversive in its messaging that you don't even realize you're being lied to. Whew. After all that, let's calm it down a bit. It wouldn't be a Tales of Atonement crossover if I didn't throw some comparative mythology into the mix. Shall we get into that? We shall. Chew on this for a while. Attack on Titan has some surprising ties to mythological characters from Norse, Irish, and German mythology. Germanic and Norse mythology envisions an apocalyptic event called Ragnarok. During Ragnarok, giants break down the barriers of Asgard and go to war with the gods, killing most of them, while many giants also die in the process. Ymir is a name borrowed directly from Norse myth, a primordial being who is said to be the ancestor of all Jotun. When Ymir was slain by Odin, he used the giant's body to create Midgard, the realm in which humans live. This could be a suggested parallel to the walls of the city being made from the bodies of titans. And although he isn't actually a character named in the show, I would posit you to consider Cuchulainn of Ulster Cycle Irish myth. Cuchulainn, the TLDR, was a boy who was inducted into violence at a young age. Originally called Setanta, he was given the name Cuchulainn after he accidentally killed a dog of a blacksmith. Cu meaning dog or hound, so he's literally the Hound of Cuchulainn. He went on to learn battles from Scatach and wielded the fearsome Galbolg, the belly splitter spear. However, there was a darker side to Cuchulainn that makes him very similar to a Titan shifter. Cuchulainn was said to have a power called the Warp Spasm, or Riestrad. The Warp Spasm was a fearsome state that Cuchulainn could induce in combat. His body would grow to a massive size, his skin burst open, his jaws would unhinge and grow massive tusks or teeth. He was a beast that could no longer determine friend from foe, and his enemies, as well as his comrades, soon began to fear his power. Some people say the Warp Spasm is proof that Cuchulainn was a werewolf. Given his name meaning hound, maybe there's some truth to that. Cuchulainn was also arrogant and haughty. He thought highly of himself and his prowess, so highly, in fact, it led him to killing his own son. This moment, however, broke Cuchulainn. In his hubris, despite the warnings of his people, from his wife, he refused to listen, and it cost him a member of his family, his bloodline, and his legacy. Cuchulainn dies in battle after this, going to war against Queen Meb and Lugaid. Refusing to fall, he ties himself to a rock to remain standing, and none would approach for fear of what he may still do if they got too close. It wasn't until a crow, the Morrigan in disguise, landed on his shoulder that people finally accepted that he was gone. And isn't mythology fun? Seriously, sometimes I hear people talk about how anime overdoes it with Arthurian characters and mythological characters when these things get adapted, but Something I've learned while reading through a lot of this stuff myself is, I don't think anime does enough. These stories are absolutely wild, and if you want to see me go over any other types of mythologies, you gotta check out some of the other Tales of Atonement crossovers I've done in the past. Seriously, this one got me out of the slump because I got to talk about some seriously dark shit that I think will really interest the people who like anime like this. Maybe we should bring the crossovers back. Damn it, Bree was right again. Okay. I thought up the story for the three of them. Here it goes. Martin, Madeline, and Shane, living in an alternative Attack on Titan universe, would originally be inhabitants of Wall Rose. After the Wall Rose invasion, Martin makes the decision to join the Corps because the sanctity he has grown up with that the walls provided was shattered. Madeline, however, joins for different reasons. Her family name, Rose, takes the invasion extremely personally. Though Madeline doesn't want to join, the culture of valorism and national pride, along with a familial name, make her a symbol of inspiration and the resilience in spite of the Titan invasion. Shane follows suit, most similarly to the role of Armin. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to his friends. Others that join roles in this particular story, Blair and Tam McNamara, would also join this. Ironically, Blair would have the similar dream to Armin as well, seeing the ocean, while Tam comes along as much needed support for Martin and the group. Pat would already be part of the factories making Titan-slaying blades and aerial maneuvering gear they'd all be relying on, while characters like Danny and Imel are the reasons they fight to protect their home. The first Titan conflict they face comes at night. Sudden, disrupting sleep, several are taken instantly. Blair has just enough time to wake Shane and the others before being lost to the dark. They rise, don their gear, and take the fight seriously. Martin is a beast on the battlefield. His reaction speed and strike strength were already the top of his class, but people seeing him in action start to whisper along with legends like the Ackerman line and Eren Yeager. Shane is distraught by the end of the battle, peeling Brian off a severed tree limb. He's doing everything in his power to save him, but with no luck. The wound is too great. The doctors are not near enough. The loss of Blair and Brian at the hands of the Titans rocks Martin to his core, though he remains a rock for Shane and Madeline to remain anchored to. Inside his heart is cold as steel. So when next they meet the Titans, while charging headlong from their horses, Martin takes a backhand that sends him sailing over the length of a football field. He lands hard, but the pain doesn't seem to last. His body erupts, skin splits, he doubles in size, and his jaw stretches into fierce tusks. He's become the Warp Titan. What it lacks in size, it makes up for in incredible speed, also at the cost of longevity. With a quick burst, he's able to assail the arm of the offending Titan and rip its spine out with his jaws. But then that's it. As the Titan falls, so does Martin, and when Madeline and Shane catch up to him, all they find is their friend passed out in the buff between the quickly rotting ribs of the Titan that just died. Everyone assumes he must have been eaten, but was lucky enough that the Titan died so immediately, he was somehow able to survive. But Martin knows what he experienced. It terrifies him, and he won't speak of it. Not to anyone, because if any of them found out, he was one of the monsters they'd been hunting. What might happen to Shane and Madeline in order to silence him permanently? I want to thank every one of you once again this week for coming to these ramblings of an anxiety-ridden pyromancer.
And her dragon best friend. We're a small team just doing our best to bring our stories we've loved for decades and hope they're the kind you like too.
With a side info dump of psychology, lore, history, and social awareness.
If this is your first video, we hope you'll stay for another one. And maybe you could consider becoming a subscriber. We'd love to see you again.
Our subscribers can move mountains for a channel like this. The engagement we get just keeps growing each week. You guys are getting the word out and people are listening.
And we really can't express how grateful we are to see our passion project take off. 20 years of love and dedication are here laid bare. Help as much as you care to, but at least watch and talk with us.
Of course, we can't close out a video without giving a shout out to our patrons. Emily Masternardi,
Heinrich 28,
Pammy Poo,
JC Moreland,
Shadow Fox,
Charles Tam,
Arya Gamari,
Lundair Lumen. But also don't forget our channel members, Moose Now,
Jack McLeod,
Plebe 64 Potato,
Lundair Lumen,
7 Star Sanctuary.
and Chained Furry, Many a Mickle Maximuckle.
See you next week.